Alright, welcome. This video we're going to be discussing Jinja, what is Jinja, and what are macros, and how we're going to create some macros using some Jinja. What is Jinja? Jinja is a templating language, and templating languages allow for code to be more flexible, shareable, and legible. A good example to think of is when you have an email template that says, hello, insert your name here, and the rest of the prompt. And you can insert essentially a list of names that you already have, and it'll send out 1,000 different emails to 1,000 different people. That little insert your name part is what Jinja would do, except for SQL, and it allows you to insert those different names, of course. So in SQL, you wouldn't have to rewrite code over and over because you would be able to do this kind of thing using loops or macros, and it also makes the code a lot more legible because it condenses it and avoids all that rewritten stuff. And it allows you to change code all in one spot and apply it to the resources that reference it. You're commonly going to see Jinja represented in double squigglies or a squiggly percentage, and we're going to talk about what these mean. Whenever you guys see the double squigglies, these are going to refer to Jinja expressions. Jinja expressions are used to output values. You'll commonly see this in our ref function or our source function. So again, what do I mean by output values? Imagine we have a reference to a table here. This from is not actually gonna, pull from squiggly reference play data stage. That reference is gonna be replaced with this once our code is compiled. That's what I mean when the double squigglies are going to output something. Another example of a Jinja expression that outputs something is the this function. So this will refer to the table that we are currently in, which is funnel data incremental win. And again, once it compiles, then that code will output this. Or sorry, not this, but what I just circled. The other form of Jinja that you're going to see is in the form of squiggly percentage. So these are Jinja control statements. So these don't output anything, rather they define variables, set conditional logic, set loops, and define macros. This is all kind of in the back end though. So you actually don't see this outputted when you compile your code. So a good example is when you have to set variables here. In this case, we set a list. When you want to set for loops and end for loops, those are going to be some common examples of Jinja control statements. Jinja control statements are also going to allow us to create macros, which are going to save us a lot of time, right? So in the example from the DBT website, then we actually have a macro for cents to dollars, and we could apply that within our models so we don't need to rewrite the initial code over and over again. Right, now that we know what Jinja and macros are, let's go ahead and create our first macro. So right here I have a table just of marketing funnel data, and a common thing that we want to look for is CPMs, or cost per 1,000 impressions. I mean, you could easily do the math here within your SQL, but just for the sake of creating a macro, we'll use a macro for it. So let's just put this as a placeholder right here for CPM. We'll get back to this. So let's go over to our macros folder and we'll create new file. And macros are going to live here as SQL files as well. So let's call this cpm.sql. Now we're in here. To start your macro, you're going to go curly brace % macro. And then you're going to name your macro. So let's name it cpm m for macro. And then you're going to enter the arguments. To get CPM, we're going to need clicks, or sorry, not clicks, impressions and spend. So let's go spend and impressions. Now, what is our macro going to do? We're going to take spend divided by impressions, and we're going to multiply this by 1,000. This should give us our CPM, so let's go ahead and end this macro. with end macro, I believe it's called. And we'll save this. Now we could go ahead and use this macro in our model. So let's go back to funnel data test, and let's replace this with curly braces to call the macro. And the macro's name is, if we go back to CPM SQL, we named it CPMM right here. So we'll go back and call CPMM. And then we're going to enter the arguments that it requires, which again is spend and impressions. And these are going to correspond to our spend and impression columns in our model. So we call it spend here and impressions here. If these had different names, then we would input them in here as well. Spend, impressions. Put a comma there. We'll save. I'll go ahead and save this over here too. Oh, it's already saved. So let's see if this works. There we go. We can rename it here if we want as CPM. See, that works. So you could also rename the column over in the macro itself. So if we get rid of this, oops, save that, go to our macro, and then add the name here. Rerun this, it should still remain CPM. Awesome. So here's another example of a macro that we could use. The original use case for all the SQL code right here is to find the consecutive days that users logged in. So if they logged in for 2 days in a row, it would show a 2, 4 days in a row, a 4, and so forth, right? And I turned this into a macro, and as long as we have the table that we want to get the consecutive login dates for, a column to partition it by, and we have that date column, then we can find it. So this was originally applied to a user table for login dates, but I can also apply it to another table I have, which is the play data. So this is not logins, this is more about dates that users placed a bet. So I have that table, I have the column that I want to partition it by, the dates, and then I have the date column as well. So if I run this, and I just ran it earlier, but I'll run it again, we can see that it works still. So we can find people with streaks here, and that may be helpful for whatever analysis you want to do. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 23, 24, 25, 26. And as you can see, it's really helpful. You could apply it to any table that essentially has a user ID or a date field. Or, I mean, you can even replace this with any column you want to partition it by, and then consecutive login dates. So this video covered what Jinja is, how we could use it within DBT, what is a macro, and how can we create macros. Thanks.